Thanks for coming. This session, active defense and adversarial engagement with MITRE Engage. We're going to walk through, let's skip forward here, skip the abstract. Oh, there we go. Okay, so importantly, I know it's Thursday, and I know you've heard this speech at every session. If you would like to continue the conversation, please go into the app, click on the Join the WebEx room. What I would really like to do is use that room to connect, to actually collect some interested people, and then once they close that room down, to actually start a signal channel or something around active defense. So this is the first time I've run this particular session. So I'm looking for feedback, I'm looking for experience in this. I really appreciate it. If you want the slides, they're already posted. You can get them through the app on that side. I can promise you this, I'm not going to answer all your questions, but I am going to help you understand which questions to ask. This is an interesting field, active defense, adversarial engagement, and it is a growing field. In this session, we're going to walk through exactly, okay, what is active defense? Why is that different from your traditional defense measures? We're going to talk about adversarial engagement. We're going to talk about some of the tools that are available that MITRE has actually built, some frameworks that you should consider using if you make a decision that you are going to do some active defense. We're going to look at different solutions, platforms out there that you can use in the toolbox in this environment. I'm going to show you some alignment to Cisco products and how Cisco products can align with deception platforms. We don't have a deception platform, right? But you can leverage some of the other tools and integrate them with them. So that's one of the goals there. And then we're going to talk and take a quick peek into the future at some of the latest developments that have been created, which I'm hoping will blow your mind a little, right, on that side. Who am I? I'm Mark Stevens. I've been here for almost 27 years. I mean, not in this room, of course, but here at Cisco. That's 27 first years, because like this year, everything reinvents itself every year, right? Hello, AI. I just finished my master's program through the SANS Institute, and this technology, this actual topic, was the subject of my research program. So I'm kind of like really nerding out over it big time. I like to mentor. So I do mentoring internally at Cisco. I also do mentoring externally at Cisco. I'm a member of the Global Mentor Initiative, who are always looking for seasoned professionals like yourselves to mentor underserved areas of the country, the world, in actual fact. So professionals that are migrating from one career to another, students that are graduating that need professional assistance to prepare them for that. Those are the types of mentors I'm looking for. If you're interested in doing that, please just reach out to me. I'm a dog person. That's my latest dog. That's a Great Dane puppy. His Luddy. He turns 1 in July. Yeah, he's a fun dog. I like to sail, like to do more sailing, and that's my goal. My cohort over there, Mike McPhee, and we have a motto, right? Make it fun, or we're not coming, right? That's how we try to hang. So please feel free to reach out to me. Part of my role inside of Cisco is to learn from customers, and I take that information back and I change products, or at least I try to change products. And we developed on that side. So again, good for me to actually have a real communication with customers doing things in the field is the best way I learn, and I extend it. This was a quote from a customer of mine 4 weeks ago. We were talking about different defense solutions that he's deploying, and he made this statement, right? If a nation-state actor decided to target us, there is little we could do to stop them. Yep, true story, right? That's the reality that we're all living in. And if you say, well, what has that got to do with active defense? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because if you look at some of these things that have actually happened over the last year alone, these are the reasons we need active defense. So Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon. These are Chinese operatives who are penetrating our critical infrastructure environments, our service provider environments, but not to disrupt, to discover, to plant malware, to embed in our environment so at some point later, they will be able to, reload our networks, disrupt our infrastructure. So, if some other type of global event happened where they needed to cause us pain at home, that's part of it. Or it could be a North Korean employee now working with inside of your environment. That's not just one North Korean employee. In actual fact, that's probably 4 people that have just gotten the one job in your environment, and that's your best employee, remote worker, right? Because there's 4 people doing his job or her job. But they're there, why? Because they're there to later disrupt. They're there later to learn and to steal information. But they're not necessarily trying to take it down. Sir?
Don't we all try to do the same thing? APT.
But we're the good guys.
I'm saying we all do that.
I have...
The U.S. don't do that, okay?
I have one network to protect. Yeah, we're here for active defense. I appreciate your question because, all right, we're going to talk about adversarial engagement. John.
Isn't that why you want to stay working for the same company as long as possible? You want to be the advanced persistent threat?
Right.
But that's my point, that we all do that.
No, it's a joke. I'm a threat to their bottom line.
Let's take this to the bar afterwards, or at a coffee shop, right? I definitely would like to have this conversation, right? So let's talk about adversarial engagement. But we're actually going to do a little experiment, and I want you to actually play along with this. I want you to consider, I want you to actually take on the role of an adversary. You are going to be the hackerfish. This hackerfish, right? And I want you to consider it in your mind's eye. You are this fish. You are hiding in the weeds. You are trying to not be found, right? If you're found, you will be eaten. Now, hopefully you can start seeing correlation between your hackerfish and an adversary that may be in your network hiding, right? So in your mind, eye, think that you are the fish. But now you see this glorious light. You can't resist it, right? With that light, there's probably some fresh algae you can go up and nibble on and eat, right? So you're going to break cover. You're going to go into the light. However, that light has got a little bit of a bite behind it. This is adversarial engagement. The fish is the adversary. Sorry, the hackerfish is the adversary. We, the defenders, are the anglerfish. That's showing a lure, trying to get the fish to change behavior. If you can understand that concept, that's what adversarial engagement is. It's trying to get the hacker, right, the adversary, that person that's embedded in your network, and we should all assume that there is somebody there, right? If we want to use this technology, this active defense, we should assume that that adversary is there. We leverage active defense now. In this case, it would be a lure to bring that adversary out of the darkness, right, for us to be able to detect him. That is the first lesson, right? That is adversarial engagement, right, on that side. Adversarial engagement, sir, to your point, in my presentation, is not hack back. There are absolutely government organizations that are doing that. you know, and our tax dollars probably pay for it. So that's how we protect our country, right? But in this environment, right, in the enterprise, we are not hack back. We are defend. So each one of these use cases here, there's back in 2006, the Blue Security launched their own spam detection capability, and they would out the actual adversaries. And it worked until the Russian, alleged Russian criminal mafia took them offline, and, you know, unintended consequences. Or it would have been in Georgia where they tried to put a bill through saying if any type of connection to a network or a device would be illegal and would end up in jail time, it also had unintended consequences of if you were a researcher and you were investigating and looking for vulnerabilities, that you could also have ended up in jail. That was vetoed and that was stopped. And then finally, the last one, right? This is a hack back. This adversarial engagement is not any of these. It is not going out and stealing Bitcoin from somebody and then trying to give it to a good cause, right? It's not the Robin Hood thing, right? That is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is actually actively protecting your environment. So adversarial engagement, and this is the first time I'm going to introduce MITRE Engage. We're actually going to talk about it in great detail yet, but the important part is up there, right? Adversary engagement. We want to disrupt the operations of the adversaries in our environment. We want to have them make mistakes in our environment. We want them to make mistakes so that we know that they're there. And then we have the option of like eradicating them or studying them and learning what they're doing so that we can better protect ourselves, so we can better create our own defenses. Two of the tools in the MITRE Engage framework are denial and deception. So the deception concept is that we want to mislead and confuse that adversary in there, right? Think about the fish, think about the lure, right? We want to confuse the adversary and entice them to come out of the darkness, to connect to a system that, you know, is actually not legitimate. It's a lure. It's a system that we're going to trick them connecting. Denial, of course, is that we want to stop the adversary's progress, right? That's what we typically do. But leveraging adversarial engagement means that now we're using a different tool set. I'll say it in this now and I'll repeat it later. Active defense does not replace your existing security stack. It is another tool in your toolbox. It is another weapon in your arsenal on that side. You may be familiar with this, time-based security. It was a book published 1999-98 by Win Schwartau. And he presented this concept of time-based security, and we first presented it in concept of a fire brigade, right, or the fire. So the P means protection. The T means time. The time it takes to protect, or your protection should work, should be much greater than the time it takes to detect there's an issue and the time it takes to respond. So a simple analogy in the slide here, a fireman, right? Your fire suppression, your fire alarms, your fire doors, your safe, fireproof safe, should protect your assets longer than it takes the fire brigade to arrive and put the fire out. That's the concept of time-based security. So if we turn that into incident response, it really now falls into that detection part. So from telemetry we receive, we collect that telemetry and then we can detect. Once we've detected and we identify that there's an event, we can now move to notify and respond. So if we can make that, you know, the right telemetry, enable our detection to be as small or as fast as possible, we're now improving our own chances to be able to better secure our own environments. Active defense gives that, delivers that on that side. So the MITRE toolbox. I'm sure everyone in the room is familiar with MITRE ATT&CK. Right? MITRE ATT&CK teaches us about the different adversarial groups out there, the tactics, the techniques and procedures they use to move through the attack chain, right? From reconnaissance to impact. And each adversarial group have different tactics, and you typically learn from what they do, and how you adjust your security posture to stop them. The next is defend. Now, hopefully, if you're using MITRE ATT&CK, you're familiar with defend, because they are, as it says, complementary framework. So the purpose of defend is that it gives you details of how to detect certain attacks being used by those groups in MITRE ATT&CK. So if you know that you're being focused on by one particular, Volt Typhoon, then from that group, you know what they're doing in your environment. You can ensure that you have the right detection. Or if they're manipulating memory, that you have some way to be able to detect that memory manipulation. So defend goes hand in hand with attack. MITRE Engage, and this is what I wanted to talk about originally. It's the MITRE Engage in the actual title of the session. Here's the URL that you can get it. I will drop it into that WebEx room, right? So that's one of the purposes. If you join that WebEx room, any links, any videos I show, I will make sure it goes into there, and we can continue the conversation there. MITRE Engage is a version 2. It's actually multiple versions, but there was an original version called MITRE Shield. And in MITRE Shield, MITRE actually gave recommendations of how to do some of these things that we're going to talk about, right? How to build honeypots, how to do honey tokens, how to do memory dumps. But they decided to change direction because it's not easy. They changed direction to actually work in tandem with the industry. So there are lots of third-party organizations. There's open source tools out there that can help us. But MITRE Engage is a cyber deception framework. And it breaks down that we have goals that we want to expose, affect, or elicit behavior in that fish, right? Think cyber, think fish, right? In that attacker. Once we once we know what we want them to do, then at that point, we can actually change our approach of how we're going to do it, and that leads to recommendations on activities. These activities are then what we do in the infrastructure, how we plan around it. So MITRE Engage is more about that building the framework and the program in your environment, right? Rather than it's like, okay, they don't provide the recipes, but they may provide, these food types go together to satisfy, and match against this type of guest coming into your environment on that side. The purpose of it, right, it absolutely gives us behavioral insights, but we want to reduce risk in our environment. Active defense and engaging with those adversaries in our environment reduce risk. That's the goal that we're trying to do here. So I've labeled them in here, and I've provided a nice table here, so if you ask for afterwards, you can go back and compare this information. I wasn't going to go through here, but I did want to talk about engaged in depth, right? This is the critical part. So I mentioned already that Engage doesn't give us the technical know-how of like, this is what you want to do. It gives you a framework. The framework is in 3 steps. Prepare. That's your planning, how you prepare the operation, all the things you need to do to make sure that the operation is successful. There's the operate part. The blue part is what references the technology and the partnership with industry, open source, or your own ingenuity on that side. And then the last one, understand, is the after action report. Right? Like any good incident or tabletop exercise, there's the before, middle, and end. The end is the part where we learn and then feed that back into our program. Same thing happens here. So let's talk about prepare. You want to know, right? In our building our cyber threat model IBO earlier this week, the comment was made that I trust nobody. Well, that's good, but that's not how you build a security program. Trusting nobody is not the way to start. You need to know what's threatening you, what's targeting your environment. Or maybe you don't know who's doing it, but you know that ransomware is my #1 threat, right? Whatever it may be. So the first thing we do with inside of here is our threat intelligence. We have to learn what are the threats to our environment, right? And these are some of the ways they can do it. MITRE attack, absolutely, right? Talus white papers, blog posts, other third-party blog posts. That's how you understand what the threats are in your environment. Next is that you have to build an environment to actually engage with that adversary. Remember the premise here, that fish is hiding in the weeds. Well, those weeds are in our network. That's in our environment. We are concerned about insider threats, or we're concerned about threats, adversaries that are already in our environment. But you have to build an environment that if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to build a lure to try to convince an adversary to come and connect with it so I can detect them, it has to be safe. I have to know what it can do. I have to know what it can't do, right? And if it's going to be part of your security operation, it better be resilient, right? I'll show you a demo later of a honeypot I wrote to interact with our XDR. I learned halfway through the research that a certain Nmap scan would cause it to crash, right? Great for lab, not good for production, right? If you're building solutions that you're going to rely on for detection, it needs to be resilient on that side. You need to know when it starts and when does it end, right? If you're going to invite a bad guy into your environment and you're going to study them, at some point you're going to need to know that I'm going to pull the plug at this project once they get so far. I've learned enough, I'm going to stop it, right? Maybe that's just at the detection phase. Maybe it's not, I'm going to study their behavior in the environment. But it is part of it. Right? We need to know, well, okay, as we build up, actually, I'm going to build this out. So this storyboarding here, right? We want to outline a sequence of events. So if we're going to build something, this is an application. How might an adversary attack this application? From where in the environment might they be there? Well, this is a possible path, right? So if that's the storyboard and we're lining up that this may be the attack vector from this surface they're going to come in, then now we can work backwards, we can work forwards. We can identify the gaps in our detection tools. Maybe we do need another tool that helps us here. Maybe we need to turn on newer signatures. Maybe we need to ensure certain logs are available, right? We have to adjust our environment. We haven't started yet, right? This is the planning phase. Because if we get this wrong, whatever we do could put the organization at risk, or worse, right? We might miss the guy. We might miss the adversary inside of our environment. And then the threat modeling, right? Whether if you use something like Stride to understand what's going on in our environment, what are they after, what are they going to do, we can collect that information. That all becomes part of that prepare part. Then we move on to the next phase, the operate. And I mentioned that there is expose. So what does expose do? Right, expose objectives within the phase. The expose objective within this phase aims to reveal adversary behavior, tools, tactics, techniques, and procedures using deliberate strategies and capabilities. So we want to find the actual adversary in our environment, right? We want to collect information about what they're doing. We want to detect them. Now, each one of these areas are API monitoring, right? Whether if it's network monitoring, we need to have a baseline of what's good in our environment before we know what's bad. So it helps us actually make sure we have the right tools in that environment. If we're going to detect, we maybe deploy deception technologies so that forces that fishy out of the weeds to connect to our server on that side. We need to do behavioral analysis. Think about an application that is API-based in your environment. Do you know every different application that's supposed to connect to that API? Well, you could say, well, it has to have a key to be able to authenticate. But what if that key is corrupted or stolen, or, Mary left last week and she was, fired and she took all the keys with her? Would we be able to detect that type of behavior, right? Unusual behavior of an API usage, as an example, right? So we need to understand what our networks look like today, and then we can leverage that information. Now, I'm going to call out LUR in this one. Does this work? Okay, LUR is on here. So LURs we're going to talk a lot about. The next is our effect. So the effect phase allows defenders to take proactive and creative measures to manipulate adversarial behavior, right, and to mitigate threats. This is now where we're really going to start actually interacting with that adversary in our environment. We're going to get them to actually break cover. We're going to get to understand where they are. We're going to start putting systems into the environment that are now attractive to the adversary to be able to come out and see it. And we're going to talk more about that. And then last is elicit, right? Now, I would say this isn't for the faint-of-hearted. Right? The elicit means that I'm going to allow that discovered adversary in my environment, I'm going to allow them to actually carry out whatever they're up to. Now, hopefully, we've placed out there believable honey product, let's call it that they believe that they're connecting with live resources, and they continue so that we can actually see what commands they're using to move that forward. And then finally, the last one is understand. So in our understand, like anything, okay, we had this project up and running. We saw nothing for 90 days, right? We terminated the project. The 90-day window ended. Let's go back and discuss why did we see nothing? Is there no one there, or are our targets not attractive enough? Is they not believable enough? Right, whatever it may be, we have to adjust. Or maybe we were successful. And we were successful, so let's learn from that information. And then we can continue down, all right? How do we update our threat feeds? How do we update our threat intelligence to improve our security posture from the beginning? MITRE Engage, when you go to the website MITRE, and you understand who are the adversaries attacking you and what TTPs, what techniques they're using, there is a nice little tool where you can look at the technique that you're concerned about, and it will map out the vulnerability of an adversary using that technique, and then it will tell you which active defense platform, right, in terms of capability, to use to be able to detect or get that adversary to make that mistake on that side. All right, let's start getting into the fun side. Now, with inside of here, right, we have to make it believable. We have to make it believable that the adversary will engage in our environment. They have to see it, they have to believe it, right? And that's what the whole concept of this quote here. We have to make it believable, we have to spread those rumors in the enemy's ranks on that side. Some of the tools in the toolbox, when you go to engage and it says use a lure, these are some of the capabilities we have. So dark nets, honey credentials, honey tokens, honey pots. So a dark net. Dark net is nothing too complex. A dark net can be IP address ranges that are not used by anything else. There are no users, there's no resources there. They're there to look for unusual behavior going to there. That's why there's a graphic of a canary in the coal mine here, right? Of a honey-covered canary. Thank you, AI. The concept there, if I see traffic going there, that's suspicious. If I see any type of malicious connections, maybe that's an indicator of malware propagation in my environment. So we leverage this to actually give us information about it. Next is honey credentials. Now this sounds crazy. I'm going to take credentials and I'm going to put them in files in the environment that if an adversary finds those credentials, they can use them, right? Or maybe I'll put it in memory and they'll use Mimikatz, and it's really easy to actually decrypt that. I will put credentials out there so that they are actually able to use them, but when they use them, I now have a high fidelity detection, right, that those credentials are being used. And of course, right, those credentials aren't my admin credentials. Those credentials are being restricted to do certain things on that side. Uh-oh. Now, I put down the bottom here, planting fake credentials, right, in pastebin, not recommended, but it is an operational control. If you put something out there, it could end up, though, if you're trying to prosecute someone, as entrapment, because you're basically putting it out there in the environment. So think about it, right? That's what I like to do on the inside. If they're in your house, they're coming to your network, then all bets are off on that side. Honey tokens. It can be an attractive file. It can be an attractive drive. If someone's connecting to this, it has no other purpose except detection that somebody is either being curious or they're trying to steal something. You can place honey tokens in different locations of your network that if they're accessed, you know how deep that adversary is in your network. Well, they've just taken them off of the AD server, right, in the hidden directory that if they're connected to that, then now we know we've got a real problem, right? It's layers of detection that can be used. So it's not just one file. It could be multiple, right? Which actually leads to a conversation about, like, this isn't one person's job. This is a team's job, right? If you don't have the staffing to be able to support this, then probably don't think about it, right? It is definitely something that will improve your defenses, but it isn't something done lightly. It's not fire and forget. It's something that has to be tuned and trained on that side. And then finally, honeypots, right? So honeypots, we're going to place systems in the network that when those adversaries connect to, we now have a high definition of detection that they should not, no one should have connected to that. So we know there's something either suspicious, malicious, or incorrect in our environment that we've connected to. Decoy resistors. Benefits, threat analysis, right? We know there's a threat in our environment. Someone's just connected to this. Remember, this is on the inside of our network. Early warning. Well, someone connected to a system. Now I know there's someone in our environment. There are many. Honeypots are not a new concept. There are many out there. There are lots of open source projects out there that you can download and play with. You could write your own. As I mentioned, if you're going to write your own, make sure it's resilient if you're going to rely on it. Now, if you download a honeypot from an open source project and install it in your environment, just consider that actually could be a Trojan, right? Somebody else has planted that there just so that you might do that. That's why we go back to the beginning. We say, well, build an environment that you know is safe, right? That you can control. You're monitoring. You know what traffic is going to come and go from that environment on that side. So test before you deploy on that side. Honeypot placement is an important one, and I will drop this into the WebEx room, but the See, Think, Do. I took this out of a published military white paper from the Ministry of Defense in the UK about using deception in their environments. And that, firstly, C, right? That honeypot has to be attractive. It has to be believable, right? And it has to be easily found or found the way you want it to be found. Think, right? The enemy, right, the adversary needs to believe that this is a real resource. So if they're scanning it, then you want it to be able to give the signature that it is the type of platform that they're expecting. And then do, right? If we say that this is this type of device and they connect to it and it doesn't respond the way, then, you know, okay, maybe we've achieved our goal. We've got an adversary to connect to something they're not supposed to. But if we want to elicit behavior so we can study which tools they use, which commands they use, what are they trying to do in our environment, then it has to be believable on that side. So we continue. Placement is important. Like I said, I want you all to think internally, not externally. Now, there are services like we have Talos, and they have a platform called Crete. They drop a sensor on the outside of your network. They look at traffic coming in and out. And from that, they can actually build signatures, and you get a report about it, and you know it helps to better secure the whole platform. You know, you could work in combination with a honeypot server there, so you're forcing people to come in and out. It's a little risk to you, but it may be very noisy, right, on that side. The last one, I'm going to say this one again, right? Isolate. Whatever you deploy, make sure you have control of it, that you're monitoring it, that you know what and expect what it's going to do. I would hate for an adversary to connect into your environment and pivot off. That would be a resume generating event, right, on that side. And there's this simple pyramid here, inverse pyramid somewhat. Complexity is how complex it is. It's narrow. How simple it is wide. But the actual efficacy of these honeypots, right? What information could you as a defender learn about these? Well, if you deploy darknets, you'll probably see a source IP address of who's coming in, right? If you deploy some type of simple honeypot, you'll see source IP address and what ports were they looking for. What were they interested in? And as you go further up the stack there, if you're deploying containers that are emulating certain vulnerabilities, remember Log4j? I know everyone lost a little sleep that week, right? You could have easily deployed a Log4j server container into the environment that wasn't patched. And as you're fixing your environment, you're looking for who may be knocking on the door to look for, a compromised vulnerable services. That's the concept that you could use here on that side. All right, so how are we doing for time? Great, okay. So here, this is not comprehensive, right? These are just some of the conversation about what you could do with your own security stack, leveraging Cisco solutions. So the first one, darknets. So darknet traffic in your environment, we could leverage NetFlow-based systems, NDR systems. We could leverage IDS, IPS systems. How that works is FTD, so Cisco's Firepower Threat Defense, and probably every other IPS or IDS system gives you the ability to do custom local signatures. So you can create signatures looking for the traffic that matches this, right, that dark net. Traffic goes through the platform, triggers a signature to say, I've seen traffic going to these services. That goes to the SOC, starts an investigation, right? It's data on that side. Or maybe it would be NetFlow coming out of off the infrastructure. Because you know what the network never does? Lie, right? Network doesn't lie. Endpoints lie all the time. Servers lie all the time. You can't make the network lie. If there's traffic moving from one area to another, there's going to be a NetFlow record about it. So we can create custom detections within inside of our NDR so that we can actually see that traffic and then create an alert. And again, something suspicious has happened. We also now support Zeek. So I don't know if you're aware of that, but our NDR platform now has the ability to take in Zeek logs. And so you could create a Zeek sensor in the environment, send that into SNA, and have that generate incidents. XDR. Well, this was part of my research that I created. I wrote this little honeypot that when you connected to it, it would actually open up an incident with inside of XDR and pass over the different artifacts about the endpoint who's attacking you. So let's have a little demo of this. So once we start it, right, a simple Nmap scan with inside of here. Yeah, simple Nmap scan, right? I'm running an Nmap scan here, looking for 2 ports, 22.443. I rerun the Nmap scan. I'm adding another port now with inside of this Nmap scan. And then when I run the scan, there's now a honeypot listener on that particular service. There's a new port available, right? The honeypot itself, as soon as you connect to it, it would then write to the XDR via the API and generate an incident. Now, I'm using, obviously, XDR in this case, but it could have been any platform that you could have written to. It would give me the ability to have, if I had multiple different honeypots throughout my environment, I could focus on which honeypot, where is the adversary. I could put a priority on the system to actually see, okay, are they shallow in our network? Are they in the data center? What are they touching in our environment? It enables me to pass over attributes so that I could see exactly what TTPs they're using. So I know that they're discovering because they made a connection. They didn't actually send any commands, right? So I can send that information in. And importantly, I get the IP address of the adversary. So once I have that IP address, right, and I run through here just to validate the IP address on the system, I will post this, the YouTube link to this a little demo in the WebEx room if you're interested in seeing it. But it shows that the 203.209.206 IP address there was the adversary. So now I can drill down inside of XDR. I can drill down into that incident, right? Adversary connected to my honeypot. Honeypot sent this information into XDR. I can draw a graph. It gives the adversary's IP address. So now one of the things that XDR can do is collect all of the other information about that IP address and what else may have it done. So it will build out an investigation around that IP address. Or I could take that IP address, send it into my private intelligence, and now mark it as suspicious. So now the SOC knows to look for that internal IP address. And you can say, well, they could change their IP address. Yes, absolutely. But in this case, I have some extra information that I didn't have before because of their behavior, right? That fish came out of the weeds in that environment. How could you use this? This is a simple OT diagram. Each of these circles with a little gold circle around it represents a honeypot. In an OT environment, mostly, we know every device that's there. We know every protocol that should be happening in those environments. But sometimes we need to put devices in there. Sometimes things get misconfigured. Leveraging capabilities like this enables us to generate traffic that we could detect, right? So in this case, I've got different honeypots. They can be simple. It can be totally static. We're just looking for connections to them. So it's almost a combination of that dark net and the honeypot together. But that information now would enable us to say, well, there's unusual behavior. Or maybe there's a misconfiguration in the firewall. Why did that traffic get through, right? This would be the early detection from some of that. The next one is the honey token. So in this quick demo, I place a honey token on a Linux server, and I have a Python program just monitoring that honey token, waiting for somebody to access it. And in it, again, I kind of log in via SSH. Didn't have my coffee that day. Log into the system. What would you do as an adversary? You're going to do discovery. You're going to do some basic collection of information, right? I'm going to look to see what the operating system is. I'm going to look to see what the patches is off of the platform. All of the things that you would typically do to try to collect that information. But my real task here as the adversary is I'm looking for PII. I'm looking for social security numbers. So I'm going to use the living off the land behavior. I'm not going to try to upload malware. I'm simply going to use this find command with a grep. I'm going to search certain directories and certain file types, and I'm going to look for anything that represents a US social security number format. And as soon as I touch that file, because we're monitoring that honey token, the Python script now generates a syslog message and sends it off to my syslog server there. Boom. So the adversary doesn't see anything from the adversaries. They're still happily doing their bit, right? They're still connected. Now he's going to try to cat the actual file and take a look to see what's going on in there. So they, again, touch that file, right? Access that file. Now, you could say, well, you could do that with tripwire. You could do that with Windows monitoring and things like that. You're absolutely right. In this case, I wanted to demonstrate that we are able to generate syslog messages, right? And here comes the syslog message right now. What do I collect? I have a timestamp. I have the activity. And importantly, I also have a username because I can see who logged in at that time and issued those commands, right? Is that user credential compromised? Is it an insider threat? Is it my new North Korean employee that's now working for us that I didn't know about? We don't know. But we have information. We have artifacts that we can move forward with. you could send that information into something like Splunk, right? In here now, Splunk ES 8.0 has finding detections. So you can send in an individual alert, you can create a finding off of that then becomes a detection. You can multiply those findings into finding detections that becomes now a correlated event. So you can use, I have this IP address, I know this user, what else did they do? Let me go on and do a search to see where else they may have logged in. So very powerful capability. Some of the Cisco platforms that you could use to detect honey token behavior, one, Cisco Secure Access, right? There's a DLP within inside of Cisco Secure Access. Oh, user just accessed its file and pulled it down to read it. That was my honey token file, right? Detection. Or maybe Cisco Secure Workload. Or they've come in via the user interface, but they're doing a directory transversal and they're touching some other file now. Well, now I get to see that activity within inside a secure workload. So there are multiple ways that we could monitor those types of behavior within inside. The honey credentials is that user ID. Remember I talked about we put out poison user IDs out there and we leverage it? Well, we can leverage something called identity intelligence. And identity intelligence has a capability called a break glass ID. So it wasn't designed to be a honey credential. It's designed to, you know, disasters happening, this is the last resort address that you can use, where you can repurpose that also, a version of it, to become a honey credential. If somebody uses this, I want to see where do they log in from. I want to know exactly which system did they use to log into it. So it gives us that extra visibility on there, on that side. So the future of deception. I told you at the beginning, I'm not going to give you all the answers, but I'm going to help you know which questions to ask, right? My cousin poet here actually tried to coin that term here. But let's think about the future. Why do we need active defense? Anthropic says, warns fully AI employees are a year away, right, coming into our environment. So imagine this. You now have not only external intruders, internal threats, but now you have agentic AI that has permissions on in your environment. If an external intruder can get that agentic AI to actually start doing things in your environment, right, that's a concern. That would be for me. So maybe that's where active defense and deploying these other systems that the AI doesn't know about would help us on that side. So David Bianco, Pyramid of Pain. You may remember that. He's a Splunk guy, works for Surge, with inside of Surge. He developed this, Deceive. Deception with evaluative integrated validation engine. Deceive, right? And the concept is this, that a honeypot is LLM powered. So you can tell the honeypot to emulate any system. Pretend that you are a Linux box of this version. Pretend that you are a headless Windows server of this version. When the user logs in, right, in his experimental code, which is linked there, in his experimental code, the user logs in, it sends back to the user exactly what the user would be expecting if you were logging into a Linux platform, right? It sends back the exact same screen. Whatever commands the user enters then are shared back to the LLM. And in this case, the whole conversation goes on, and eventually the LLM can make a decision. Based off of those commands used here, this is a malicious attack. So not only do we, it kind of superpowers our honeypot deployment, because now we don't have to create our own honeypots. I mean, we can just tell it, behave like this. The more details we give it, the better it becomes on that side. It ultimately continues and, you know, gives us an advantage to be able to identify not only, this is that illicit part of the engage. We want to know exactly, not only is this a malicious actor, but what are they up to, right? This gives us some intent discovery. I have a little demo of it based on time. I'm not going to run it, but it shows you something which would blow your mind. right? Go to this link, and you'll be able to see the YouTube video of it. What it shows, as I did this, I'm going to skip here. What it shows inside of that CLI demo is I go into the actual the console. I enter certain Linux commands to do discovery, but then I go and access the password file. And then I go in and access the sudo in and take the shadow file, right? Those are only bad behaviors if for someone trying to, command escalation or identity privilege escalation, because I'm getting all of the requirements that I can now go off to my, Jack the Ripper and run a password cracking. And this is the example here. So you can see the judgment malicious it gave it. And if you look through the logs, you can see where the LLM responded like, oh, the use of sudo to access the shadow here and attempts to escalate privileges. So the LLM got the intent of what the adversary was trying to do. Very powerful. And let's start back at the beginning where I was talking about Volt Typhoon. So in Volt Typhoon, the goal of the adversary was to compromise our environment and lay dormant for later use, right? To collect information, to come back and cause trouble if something happened globally. So how would we apply active defense to here? So, if we look at the path through here, got a nice little laser pointer here. We look at the path, right? We collect information about a credential. Once we have those credentials, we can then, compromise, access vulnerable systems. We get more credentials, and then we can do discovery, and we continue to build in for the infrastructure. That's the concept. It's an escalation of that attack within inside of here. So what would we do for active defense? What would we do for active defense in this environment? Well, honey credentials. So again, right? We put some credentials that we know are fake, that if someone uses them, it's an early detection. We put it inside of there. Honey tokens, more honey tokens, files that they may have accessed on those AD servers, or credentials that may be hidden in there. Again, we want that little fish to make mistakes so that we know they're in our environment. And then as they proceed forward, honeypots, better honeypots. But let's think about what they were trying to do, right? Salt Typhoon was focusing on our Cisco infrastructure and service providers' networks. So how about if I did this? If I took Deceive, thank you, Mr. Bianco. If I took Deceive and I told it to be a Cisco router, that it could emulate a Cisco device on the network now. So this is exactly what I did. And this is a screenshot of actually the outcome. I logged into it via SSH. It gave me the login banner exactly as if it was a router. I could issue router commands, even shortcut router commands, so conf.t. I could issue those commands, and it was able to convert those and provide back to me the appropriate experience. I could go into enable mode. It would show me the appropriate interface. I could issue commands like remove logging, turn off logging, and then reload in an hour, right? If someone was doing that in my environment, that would be pretty suspect, right? I would want to know about that. Well, that's exactly what happened here. And if you read through the text, and again, I will post this, it's in the slides, but I will post it into the WebEx room, the video recording I did of this. It is very, very effective. It's very, very effective at being able to emulate that Cisco router environment. And how much coding did I do to be able to achieve this? I just told Deceive that you are a Cisco router of this version. I could now go actually up my game, go back and give it a config. You're not only a router, but this is the config you're running. These are the commands that you're running with inside of there. It was, it actually, to be honest with you, it blew me away. I wasn't expecting of how well it was, so great job, David, on that side. So we're wrapping up now. Active defense summary. So the purpose of deception, right? Leverage deception assets in your environment. We want to get that fish to break cover. We need to be convincing, but we want to provide reasons that that adversary will come and connect to your assets. Visibility. I've always had like the concept of without visibility, there's no security, right? That's still true, right? I want to see everything going on in my environment. This helps provide additional visibility because maybe we can get the adversary, right, through that adversarial engagement to show me what they're actually up to show me the commands, their intent, so that I can now take that back, and as it says at the bottom here, threat intelligence looping. Whatever I learn, I can go back and improve my own posture, my own security posture inside of this environment. And engagement. I didn't really go into much detail about this, but part of the reason that we do adversarial engagement, active defense, is we want to slow down the attacker, right? If we can show them something that they have to work hard to get to, well, firstly, maybe they will, they'll reveal something to us that we don't know. Interestingly, there's two camps about operational security of active defense, and is do you tell people that you have this running in your environment, or do you keep it a secret? So the one concept of telling people that you actually have active defense systems in use is that it now puts doubt in the mind of the attacker that what they're connecting to is real. So maybe they'll move on to somebody else. Right? Now, operational security of not telling anybody is, if you're using honey tokens, if you're using these fake credentials out there, you don't want everybody to know about them, right? If there's files out there that you don't want people touching, right, in general, you don't want people knowing about it. So only a smaller operational team would know about those things. That's the value of it. Importantly, at the bottom, right, this isn't a replacement for your current security stack. This isn't a replacement for your defense in depth that we've been doing, for the last 50 years, 100 years, whichever, whether you're talking cyber or physical, right? It is not that. This adds capabilities to your detections, right? It adds capabilities to improve your defenses. Okay, that is it. I really appreciate everyone coming today. The surveys are really important. 5 good, 3 bad, right? Anything below that, you won't see me again, right? I do appreciate if you put comments in there. If you have ideas of what you would like to see, I wanted to make this a 90-minute session, but I could only get a 60-minute session. But if you have ideas, please let me know, because I want to put it in. If you're interested in creating either a WebEx group or a Signal channel to have this conversation move forward, let me know in the WebEx or just email me directly, and then we can work on that afterwards. I think active defense, especially because of some of the activities going on, because of AI coming in our environment, has a place in our arsenal that we should be using on that side. There's a lot of things going on this week, so we're at the end of the week on that side. All of these sessions are now recorded. They will be published in the next 10 days or so. Mr. McPhee over here does a phenomenal session about MITRE ATT&CK and how to build your own threat model inside of the environment. Truly recommend that. That's it. So with that, thank you very much for coming.